they just would really add and a great breath of fresh spring air to any Titanic party or any kind of mealtime for celebrating the recipes in this book. But if I had to pick one real specific one that really fits the bill with the way you described it, I would have to say tripe and onions. And not that I love tripe, but I had never really explored it much. And it was on the menu in third class. So we really wanted to have a study of tripe. We have several tripe and onion recipes. And by the time I finished talking with the people who were still making the tripe and onions that their grandparents had made in England, Australia, Ireland, not just in the United States, but all over, I actually started to think this is a really neat dish. And I loved it when I tried it. I test drove all the recipes and really enjoyed trying all of them. But I was more surprised than any other recipe by how wonderful and lovely the tripe and onions recipe was. And in addition to that, there was one tripe and onions recipe in particular where I actually developed a friendship online with a woman in Johannesburg, South Africa. And her recipe for tripe and onions from her family is featured in the book. And her name is Sonia Geyer. And we've become real good friends on Facebook and Instagram because of our connection with the book. And that's one of the neat things about this project. It was an incredible collaboration.
Hey everyone, Scott here. We're going to take a very short break for a word from our sponsors. Something I'm interested in is all the human stories with the Titanic, because it seems like you see the best and the worst of humanity in this episode,
yes.
which I guess could come out in any disaster. And that's something else you delve into. In terms of the best, if we look at that, sort of the gallantry and the bravery in the face of doom, are there any stories that stick out to you of somebody that was your favorite to research or somebody who most inspired you with their bravery?
Well, I was really inspired by so many stories. It was just incredible. The people who put others before them. But the one person I think that stands out the most is someone who consistently helped others. When 9/11 happened and everyone didn't know what to think or what direction to go next, Mr. Rogers shared a really personal story with everyone about something his mother said to him. And he wanted it to help people in the face of disaster. And she said to him, Fred, when there's a disaster, always look for the helpers. There will always be people helping. And there truly were in this case. And one of those was the first person who comes to my mind when I think of that is Margaret Brown, or Molly Brown. We know her today in popular culture as the unsinkable Molly Brown. It's kind of her moniker, or the way people kind of think of her. And it's mainly because of the reputation she built for herself of always thinking for others. Even when fear was right in her face, she thought of things like encouraging the women in her lifeboat to row to keep warm. A little thing like that. How many people would be thinking about that when their own life was in danger? Once aboard the Carpathia in the wee hours of the morning of April 15th, we hear stories of her getting people together and galvanizing people to honor Captain Rostron of the Carpathia, who went through a very dangerous field of icebergs to get to the Titanic survivors. So I'm inspired incredibly by so many of these people. They really were the wind beneath my wings through an incredible year for me personally. But if I had to pick one person to tell you about right now, it would be Molly Brown.
Now, another reason I like history is there's plenty of negative case studies of what not to do, and I'm sure there's plenty of those people on the Titanic as well. Who stuck out to you on the other extreme of someone that you dislike the most in your research?
Well, by far, the one person who stuck out as a nasty scoundrel was someone who was on board the Titanic. And the reason he was on board the Titanic was quite ironic when you consider his fate. He was traveling back home. His farm in Kentucky was said to be affected by some severe flooding, and he was coming back from a trip to Germany. The reason why he went to Germany is because he had recently inherited an estate from a widow that he had befriended. And her name was Frau Hasse, and somehow he had, Dr. Morawek is his name, somehow Dr. Morawek, who was known for, flirting and encouraging the young single ladies on the ship to spend time with him and commit to more time once they reached New York. Somehow he had gotten Frau Hasse to turn over her whole life estate to him. They weren't even married, and they somehow became friends through their travels. She came and stayed with him for a while in the United States. She was from Germany, and he inherited her entire estate. So he was going to Germany to see what he could do with this villa. And, there had to be lawyers involved because Frau Hasse had children and grandchildren and all sorts of people that claimed that it was their family estate. Well, the newspaper stories that I saw about this man, Dr. Morawek, he was known for inventing a tool for removing cataracts. Several reports claimed that this was not the first time that he did this, that he had, done this before with other widows. And so to me, he definitely stuck out as someone a bit nefarious compared to some of the heroes like Molly Brown.
Yeah, and we're going to see much more of Dr. Morawek and Molly Brown in future episodes. So if people are interested, we'll get way more into their story and probably about 24 other stories like that where you really see the full spectrum of humanity for good and for bad when they're thrown into such an extreme situation. All right. Thank you for giving us that setup. In the next several episodes, we're going to be looking at all the different types of people who are on the Titanic, various professions, people from various backgrounds, from third class to first class. And in the next episode, we're going to kick off this series by looking at the baker. See you there. All right. Well, that is the show for today. Thank you so much for listening. First of all, I'd like to thank the Knowlton's Rangers, and especially our spy masters, Baron Freza, Carl from Norway, Chris from Maine, Moon Doggy from Ohio, and Rick Knowlton, and I'll explain what that means in a second. If you like the show, please leave a rating or review on the podcast listener of your choice, whether it's iTunes, whether it's Stitcher, Google Podcasts, whatever. Also, we have a Facebook page. You can join us there to keep up the discussion on latest episodes. And finally, if you really want to dig in deeper with this show, I encourage you to join the Knowlton's Rangers. The Knowlton's Rangers were an elite reconnaissance and espionage detachment of the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War, but it's also the name of the History Unplugged membership program. Learn how to join by going to patreon.com/unplugged. So here's what you get if you become one of the Knowlton's Rangers. If you join at the level of Scout, you can get early access to new podcast episodes, along with enjoying absolutely every single episode of the History Unplugged podcast ad-free. All 270 and counting episodes. If you join at the level of Intelligence Officer, you can also get access to premium episodes, like a multi-part series on the life of Audie Murphy, the most decorated combat soldier in World War II, or the 10-part series Ottoman Lives, a series that looks at the cast of characters that made up the Ottoman Empire, such as the Sultan, the Eunuch, the harem servant girl, and the soldier. And finally, if you join at the level of Spy Master, you get all the same stuff as the Scouts and Intelligence Officers, but you also get a shout-out to you and or your business at the end of each episode, a 3-pack of hardcover history books, plus you will be put at the very front of the line for me to answer your question about history, and I can guarantee I will dedicate an episode that's about an hour long or so to your question. Sign up at patreon.com/unplugged. Again, that's patreon.com/unplugged. Anyway, those are the ways you can help out the show. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks for listening to the History Unplugged podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get your daily dose of all things history related, from ancient Greece to the Cold War. We'll see you next time at the History Unplugged podcast.